Today we encounter one of the best known and probably most quoted verses from the Bible, from Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. It is used so often. And I wondered, as we go through our journey through Jeremiah, I wondered whether people understood it. I wondered whether we understood what it was we're praying for, what we're asking God for, and what it is we're yearning for as we respond to that verse. So here's a bit of the story around that passage. When Babylon raided Jerusalem in 587 BC, their strategy, Babylon's strategy, was to deport all the people of influence and leadership from wherever they were raiding. And so they take the most gifted people of society back to Babylon, which made it easier then for them to take over the city or the region that they had occupied. It also filled their population with gifted people. And it's a crafty thing to do. It's a way of managing your occupation. Now, interestingly, Jeremiah was left behind with the remnant in Jerusalem, and that's probably because he had spent most of his life being ignored by the people living in Jerusalem, and therefore he wouldn't have drawn the attention of the Babylonians when they came to visit, because Jeremiah wouldn't have seemed to be prominent in any way. Anyway, those who were carted off to Babylon actually had a really good life. Even though we speak about it as exile and we hear the pain of the people in exile, they were not imprisoned in the strictest sense of the word, because they were free to make a life for themselves. The only thing they weren't allowed to do, which is a big only thing, but the only thing they weren't allowed to do was to go home. And being denied the freedom to go home was an overwhelming burden for the exiles. It dominates their conversation and their writing and their praying and their thinking. They felt sorry for themselves, and as we know from the psalm, they famously wept at the rivers of Babylon when they remembered Zion. And their religious leaders didn't help much at all, because those leaders stirred within the people a sense of this unfairness of their circumstances and a sense of the injustice of the exile. So they fanned the flames of discontent within the people. And so instead of helping the people to quote a lovely African song, to be bright in the corner where you are, these religious leaders instead taught the people to feel sorry for themselves. They endorsed their sense that they are people who are hard done by. And in addition to that, and this is probably the big thing, they also kept promising the people that these troubles would soon be over, that the exile was imminently coming to an end, and so their troubles would soon pass. And this teaching of the soon passing troubles ended up having a terrible practical consequence on the lives of the exiles, because they effectively gave up living. They were waiting to be rescued, for the exile to end. And so convinced were they that the exile would end soon, that they lived kind of in this no man's land, in a nowhere place, disinvested. They were neither here nor there. And so they had no jobs to which they gave themselves, no permanent homes, no meaningful real relationships, just a life on the surface, a life in waiting, a life of indifference. Eugene Peterson describes them as having been parasites on Babylonian society in that time. And then one day King Zedekiah, Babylon's puppet king who had been installed to run Israel, those who were left back around Jerusalem, he sent 2 ambassadors to Nebuchadnezzar to keep the relationships going. And en route, they stopped to greet their countrymen and women who were in exile. They came and said, "How's it? We from Jerusalem, how are you doing?" And to deliver a letter from the prophet Jeremiah to that exiled community. And I think it's a miracle that Jeremiah's letter makes it to the exiles in Babylon, but it does. And that was our reading for today, by the way. And the essence of this letter was, stop listening to your preachers and teachers who only tell you what you want to hear. Because it's nice to know that this trouble will soon be over. It's nice to have someone say to you, yeah, it is terrible. And so Jeremiah's letter is going, stop listening to those preachers and teachers. Face the truth of your situation and receive God's promises for you. That's the essence of the letter. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. Those words, as we said at the beginning, has resonated with millions of people over the years because it speaks such deep comfort to us when we're in trouble, when life feels unsure, when life feels uncertain, when life feels difficult. And so I thought that today we might look a little more deeply into this much loved verse and see that it is perhaps richer than it is understood to be in its common usage. So 3 thoughts. When you're in trouble, be careful who you listen to. I think it's one of the lessons from our passage today. When you're in trouble, be careful who you listen to. Exile was filled with longing and homesickness, envy of those who got to stay behind in Jerusalem, the pain of living among strangers who have strange habits and strange language and strange culture, and the disconnection from their spiritual home of Jerusalem, from the temple. They lived with a consistent sense of being strangers in a strange land. Exile is to be where you don't want to be. We all have our own version of exile in today's world: a cancer diagnosis, a divorce, adult child leaving home, unemployment, retirement, when we have to downsize our homes as we get older, moving into bedsitters and frail care. If our relationships have gone wonky and we're estranged from friends or family, perhaps we suffer with depression and understand that we become something of a stranger to ourselves. Every human being has some sense of what it is to live in exile. And in that moment, when we're in that kind of a place, the voices we listen to matter deeply. The religious leaders in Babylon told the people what they wanted to hear. It will all be over soon. Jeremiah, on the other hand, told them what they didn't want to hear, which was, you in fact are going to be here for at least 70 years. That's Jeremiah's word to them. You're going to be here for a long time. It's not going to be over soon. And as difficult as Jeremiah's word was for the community to hear, it turned out to be a critical word, a word which would eventually bear much fruit. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it turned out to bear much fruit. This word was critical for not only that moment for Israel, but it turns out even till today, because Jeremiah spoke a word which was hard to hear. So when we're in trouble, don't underestimate the importance and the power of the voices we listen to. I know this sounds obvious, but can I just mention these things? When trying to discern for ourselves which voice is best to listen to, pay attention to who the voice belongs to. What is the person's motive, the person who's speaking to us? Do they, as best you're able to find out or discern, do they have your best interests at heart? Or is this person saying something because it's just their stuff? You want to be very careful about the source of the words you listen to, and to be careful that the words you are listening to are good words. Because priests and Jeremiah were probably, all of them were good people. We've got to be careful what we're listening to. And the second thing, if I can say that, don't neglect listening to God's whisper within you. Be conscious of things like going, I know what I want to hear. I want to hear that exile will be over soon. But then we pray and say, Lord, help me to hear, not just what I want to hear, but help me to hear what I need to hear. And won't you, by the work of your Spirit, won't you prompt that in with that within me? I've learned, as I've got older, I've tried to be more respectful of the inner voice within me. I sometimes have dismissed it as just human thought. But I really do believe that God often whispers within our hearts, and listen to that inner voice. And look not for the word you want to hear, but ask God to give you the voice that you need to hear. Be careful who you listen to. The second thing I want to draw attention to today is when you're in trouble, face the truth. When you're in trouble, face the truth. Confront the truth, if you like. The Trappist monk Thomas Merton was a great advocate for the importance of being present to what is happening in our lives right now, and not being distracted by what once was, or even what is yet to be. One of his famous quotes was, "You do not need to know precisely what is happening or exactly where it is all going. What you need is to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment and to embrace them with courage, faith, and hope." You need to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment. And so as we wish that things were different where we are, as we keep hoping that things will change in the future, the reality is that wishing and hoping can leave us getting stuck. And we'll speak about hope a little more creatively in a moment, but this wishful thinking is really what I mean. Can be an incredibly destructive thing for our souls. It can keep us locked with dissatisfaction and discontent. And so Jeremiah's word to the people in exile amounts to, stop feeling sorry for yourselves. It is terrible that you are not back in Jerusalem with the others. It is terrible that you are carted off to Babylon, but stop pining for what is not and face what is. This is your reality, whether you like it or not. Stop living superficially. Stop living on the surface. Accept that this is your life for now, for better or for worse. And so invest in it, because you're going to be here for 70 years. Don't let life pass you by just because it isn't the way you would like it to be. And so he gives us a list of instructions. Get a job, build a home, establish a family, create a community, and be a gift to the people around you. Bless the city you're living in, this Babylonian city. Be a blessing to it. Of course, when you're in trouble, this is not always an easy word to hear. We might prefer more empathy and understanding. And you can understand why people would have preferred the preachers who told them this is all going to be over soon and they're there and we're so sorry it's so hard. But when we're in trouble, it's important that we're realistic and that we take a truthful look at life as it is. And to face life as it is does need, Merton's absolutely right, it needs courage, loads of it. It's not easy to face the truth. It needs lots of courage to say, this is reality and I'm going to live with it. It needs lots of faith and intrinsic trust that God has not abandoned us. Even though we're in exile, even though we're in Babylon, we have not been abandoned, no matter how painful this reality is for us. And it requires hope. Hope. Let me, in closing, make my third observation, which I hope will clarify a little bit of what we mean by hope. And that's then to say, when you're in trouble, choose to live for the thing you want to live for. And I'm going to clarify that in a moment. Choose to live for the thing you want to live for, your heart desires to live for. When we are in exile, when we are in trouble, the choice is whether we will withdraw into self-pity, into moaning, into complaining, into wishful thinking, or whether we will build houses, plant gardens, be fruitful, seek the well-being and prosperity of those around us, and pray for the place we live in, to use Jeremiah's words. It's a choice we must make. It stands before all of us when we are in trouble. So this is the reason for the title for this point, if you like. This is what Merton says. He says, if you want, speaking of himself, if you want to identify me, ask me not where I live or what I like to eat or how I comb my hair, but ask me what I am living for in detail. Ask me what I think is keeping me from living fully for the thing I want to live for. What's stopping me from living fully in this world and in this place where I am right now? And so I want to say to us today, and I feel this deeply, I think that this is probably the most important thing for me in today's word. Jeremiah is not some ideal we sit around waiting for, because we have a sense of that sometimes. Oh, I hear it from people. I know the plans I have for you, as if this is about to happen somewhere down the track, some years ahead or whatever the case is. But the prosperity of God promised in that verse, the promised future of God in that verse, the protection of God in that verse, they aren't waiting for us down the road. They are with us already, is what Jeremiah wants them to know. God is with you to help you live for the thing you want to live for, the thing you need to live for. And so Jeremiah says, as we've pointed out, stop sitting around and welcome God's plan for your life. Will you forgive my language when I say to you, get off your backsides, live, create, and grow? I think Jeremiah might have been an honest kind of prophet like that. Get off your backsides, live, create, and grow. Stop living superficially and live fully for the thing you want to live for. This was what I was referring to a little earlier. In the history of the Hebrew people, the years in Babylon turned out to be one of their most creative and productive seasons. In fact, a great deal of our scripture was born in and through those years. For example, I don't know if you know Genesis 1, the famous "in the beginning was the word" passage. In the beginning, God created. Sorry, I'm getting confused with John 1. But that the famous opening passage of Genesis chapter 1 of the whole Bible, that was written in Babylon. It was the product of their suffering and the product of the world in which they lived. But I think Jeremiah's word had made it into the community, and the people decided to live where they were, to be creative and to be fruitful. And so one of the godliest things we can do is to live well where we are. One of the godliest things we can do is to live well where we are. And so I invite you to resolve a few things for your life. Here they are. Resolve, with God's help, to do the best with what you have and to worry less about what you don't have. Resolve, with God's help, to do the best with where you are and not longing to be where you are not. Resolve, with God's help, to build community, to use Jeremiah's phrase, to build houses. Be a person. I can't tell you how important this is. I'm feeling it deeply in my own life and community. Help people be together. I see people giving up on community and chasing their own selfish needs a lot. But help people build community, help build houses, help bring people together. Community is essential for our world and essential for ourselves. And finally, resolve to be fruitful. Resolve to be creative. Some listening will be in very limited environments where life has got to a point where they can't do much anymore. But even for you, I say, seek a way to think of your life as being a source of fruitfulness and creativity in our world. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. The Lord bless you and keep you.